and welcome to Night Clerk Radio, episode 74, where today we are, for another year, ignoring all the requests to do a Valentine's Day episode, and instead, sorry everybody, talking about the music of Null Object. So what is Null Object? Null Object is the lo-fi house / vaporhouse musical project. Yet another musical project of podcast favorite Groceries, a.k.a. JPEG Stripes, who has a lot of side projects. Just does a lot. So like JPEG Stripes is a glitch art / streaming handle. They do like retro game streaming and stuff on Twitch, or they've been doing a code camp to like get a job in development. So they're streaming like, this is my capstone project, and having people like test it out and chat. And
oh, that's cool. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's just that kind of like glitch stuff. And then, of course, Groceries classic, like vaporwave, MallSoft projects that we've talked about many, many times.
Yes.
So Null Object is kind of the last thing that we haven't really covered, which I had not even really known existed until we did the most recent Groceries album a couple months ago. And I just saw like also Null Object on their, I think like Instagram or Twitter profile. And I was like, oh, yet another musical project. And I chose it because, I do love Groceries. That last album was probably one of my favorite of last year, along with that whole 4-disc series. And also, like, I've been passively on his Discord, which every so often he posts a public link. It's not like a secret thing. It's
it's actually on his Bandcamp for Null Object right there.
Yeah, so I think wants everybody to kind of come together, and it's sort of like one place to talk about everything that he's doing. Yeah. And it's actually a pretty cool little place. Like, I don't talk there as much because I think I feel a little old for the community, which is kind of an issue with vaporwave in general, where everyone feels like very mid-20s to me. And I just don't want to be like, the dude in his late 30s talking. Yeah, it's a personal thing. It's not them, it's me. But I did poke my head in one night because he does Sunday VHS night, which is currently on hiatus with being busy with school, but just picks VHS, has a VCR run through like a capture card and streams it. And everyone just kind of watches together. So I poked my head in, and it was sort of interesting because you think VHS night, like my brain is so wired to think like cult movies, right? Like, oh, we're watching VHS, like put in, like something cliche, like Troll 2 or, Samurai, something cliche. But they're watching the original like 90s Disney release of Sleeping Beauty. And you laugh, but it was actually nice because like, it was a completely unironic watch. It was not making fun of it. It was actually talking about all the stuff that's like interesting or good or historically relevant about it. And it was really nice to just like sit and not be steeped in like 12 layers of cynicism about media and just like watch and enjoy something and like not think you're too cool for it because everybody thought it was cool, or it has like, dated elements and, the man rescuing her and all this stuff. It was just a very like authentic, whatever that word means anymore, chance to just sit and like watch something that's not that bad and pretty important to the history of like animated cinema.
Yeah, no.
And not just like blatantly like shit on it because you can.
So was it like a VHS rip of it? So it had the VHS like
it was not even a rip. We were watching the tape. He had the clamshell.
Oh, wow.
Popped the tape in a VCR into a capture card. So he watched all the ads. Watched all the opening. You just watched the VHS. Yeah, everything. Because they used to have like, here's 40, VHS.
FBI warning. Yeah.
FBI warnings, 40 ads for every other tape that's coming out.
Copy this tape.
Yeah. Don't copy this not floppy. It was just a really nice experience. So like, if you do see that link and that's something interesting, I definitely shout out that community. Everyone there is really nice. No one there has been mean. Some people like post and share their art, or they post and share links to like other vaporwave stuff. So if you're into that type of thing, I think it's probably a good community to poke your head in and
no, that's really cool.
Kind of see what's going on. Yeah,
I know your experience in like going into Discords, not specifically that one, but Discords where you realize that you're like way older than the average user there, or like and so it's interesting to interact. Like I went into Signal and Wave one and had sort of a similar experience, and like a indie RPG one. For a game called Fist. It's really interesting and to see the different.
It's real. We're gonna go down this tangent for a second because it's real hit or miss. So I thought everybody in his Discord was super nice and mature and cool. So it wasn't like, oh, they're kids, I don't like them or whatever. It's just like, this is their space. These are not really my spaces. When I was that age, I wanted my space too.
Sure.
But there are other places where you're like, oh my God, I can tell everybody here is like 12 and illiterate. Because like I'll poke my head into a Discord for a recently resurged idle clicker game.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
And because that's just where they post like things that you can import into the game, like to do less work and stuff. Basically, like whatever, it doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
But the point is, like, everyone there is like fighting over like math and wrong, and like trying to be their lords of their own little domain of like this little game Discord. It's just very weird to me.
Seeing the like broken dynamics of like forums recreated on Discord.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I'm going to be the king shit of the antimatter Discord. Like
what happened on Usenet and then IRC and now message boards.
Everywhere.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's the digital equivalent of everyone forming their little towns in Mad Max or something.
Mm-hmm. Libertarian town turned in overrun by bears. Writ
exactly. Exactly. But back to the music.
Yes.
So this is the Lo-Fi Vaporhouse project, and I wanted to do it not just because all the reasons I just mentioned about liking this community and wanting to support this artist, but also like EDM, anything remotely EDM adjacent, which I know I've talked about this before, at least on bonus episodes. I'm pretty sure on public episodes, has always been like a real blind spot for me, like just something I've never really gotten into. I am not really like into house and stuff typically, so I thought it would also be an opportunity to use the structure of this podcast to engage with that and try to listen to something that I would never listen to on my own and see if that works out. So I know that you have thoughts on EDM, so I'm going to turn the mic over to you because I've been rambling.
Yeah. EDM is, I am passionate about EDM. I have different, very strong opinions on different subgenres of EDM.
Great. Perfect.
Yeah. I can tell the difference between them. And, house, when probably like when I think of house, the first, if I want to like, this is what house music is, it would be Daft Punk Around the World. That's like late 90s. Like that's sort of like the classic house track, right? Like it's this very steady 4/4 beat. It's very like just, and house music is meant to like do like its goal is to get your ass on the dance floor and get you moving, right? Like that is, I mean, that's what like it's called electronic dance music for a reason. Like I can listen to some house, but it never really clicks. My true love, as I've mentioned before, is drum and bass, and drum and bass is a lot faster, than house music. With like 180 BPM instead of like 120 or 160 or whatever of house music. But there are some subgenres of there are particular house tracks and things. Like I do like Daft Punk, and listening to this just overall, I was really impressed with the idea of like taking house music and experimenting with it to try and push it beyond like house music is like, this is music for the nightclub. This is music to get people's, asses moving. And like, that's it. And so like the aesthetic and like the style of it is all focused on that experience and not like trying to do or say anything more. And I think the great idea of Null Object is to take like the vaporwave aesthetic and apply it to house music. I mean, like, well, that worked for me overall. But like, yeah, it's just there's so much. I mean, house music is so popular, and there's so many subgenres of it and types, and it's hard to keep track of at times. And it's really interesting.
Yeah, like I mean, I don't even know like. Is jungle its own genre, or is it like a
jungle's
modifier?
Like it's closer to drum and bass. It like drum and bass came out of jungle. Like again, it's a faster BPM. I think it's more, of course I'm biased. I think it's more complex and more interesting to listen to than like house music. Like house music is really the house music I associate with like trying to get people in this like hypnotic, like it's repetitive, but like it's trying to get you in this like euphoric dancing state. Like, it's trying to get you basically high without, the use of chemicals or perhaps enhanced with chemicals. Let's be honest. Yeah. To get you into that state where you're not really, an altered state of consciousness. And
right.
Drum and bass, one thing I always like about EDM is, it's meant for that, meant to get you to dance. And yet people like me, I use it to work. I use it to like stay focused while I'm writing because it's fast, it's energetic. And like when I have drum and bass on, I can be writing. I can be doing anything other than, podcast editing because I have to, listen to that. So any work where I don't have to listen, I would put on drum and bass. I use it to work out too, like to exercise. So I like the idea of taking EDM and applying different aesthetics to it because it's, drum bass, the lyrics are always about like making connections and love and like staying up to seeing dawn and just like very generic kind of like, subject matter that is very pop like adjacent, right? Like in terms of subject matter and stuff like that. So, but there are links I think I sent you about like really technical breakdowns of what is different about that.
Yeah. It's funny that there's kind of like two main signifiers. Like you keep talking about BPM, right? Where they're like house is like 115 to 140. And I guess if you're under 115, you're trance. And if you're 140 to 170, you're jungle. And if you're 170 up, you're D&B. And I'm like, okay. But there are like other differences too. House is very, anybody who's heard a Daft Punk song, house is very 4 on the floor, right? Which is like just keeping that quarter note going, keeping that pulse with typically the kick drum, that's the floor. And then I always think of D&B or like jungle and stuff as having more syncopation, more things on offbeats or non-stressed beats. So like a little more interesting.
Yeah.
Rhythmically.
Yeah. Yeah. Like Daft Punk is, like the first time I listened to Around the World, like before I got into EDM at all, like I was like, this is boring. This is just the same fucking thing for 3 minutes. Like
it reminds me, like I always remember some meme where it's like the lyrics are some, I don't know, like Bling era, 50 Cent song or whatever. And so he's like, oh, this is just trite trash. And then the next panel is like Around the World is repeated in the background like 100 times. Like, yes, real patrician music.
Yeah, it's very good. And, certainly, there was a time where I loved Deadmau5. Like I listened to Deadmau5 like 10 or 12 years ago. And
do you have a dubstep phase?
The what?
Dubstep phase? Do you have a Skrillex?
I did have a Skrillex phase. I am not ashamed. Yeah, I know. That's why I have a soft spot for anything, any meme referencing MLG gaming, 360 no scoping. You got to have Bangarang on that. That's the law. Like,
it's the Dragula of the aughts or something.
Yeah. There we go. Yeah. Every decade has its own Dragula. That's really what it comes out to. But you don't have that problem with the Null Object for sure. Null Object is, it's just a really smart idea. And I overall, before we get into specific tracks, I just hope Groceries continues with this because I would like to see other artists try this idea of like taking vaporwave ideas and applying them to EDM genres. I think that'd be really cool. I'd love to get vapor drum and bass. That would be,
oh my God,
that'd be crazy.
Yeah, we should look into it because it is tagged as vaporhouse, which does have a fair amount of albums on it. So that'd be an interesting thing maybe to dig into in the future and see what other people are doing with it. So for Null Object specifically, the body of work, at least as like that I could immediately find, is unfortunately a little on the small side. So there's one 5-track album from 2018 called Cooperative Taxi Station. Then from 2019, there's a EP for one of the tracks on that album, Fire Reward, has a few remixes, and then one new track on there. And then there's a handful of like remixes on the SoundCloud for Null Object. So why don't I give people a little sample of kind of what this sounds like, and then we can kind of get into just talking about all of those together.
Help make improvements, but her suggestions received no meaningful response. As a result, not only did she lose her client, she lost some of her self-confidence, her original enthusiasm, and much of her potential for future sales performance. And as her sales performance erodes, her company's position will erode. Everyone's job will be adversely affected.
that's a bit from track 1 off Cooperative Taxi Station, which is called Business Alert. Mm-hmm. And that immediately, I think you understand what they're trying to do with this fusion, right? Where you have very house undertones, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, the very house beat, but there's like weird, ironic business samples over it. They sound like they're from training tapes or something of that regard. And I picked this as the sort of one as the first sample because I think of a lot of the stuff, it's the one that felt the most housey to me, or like what I think of as house music, not knowing really much about it at all, just like as a complete outsider to that. Mm-hmm. And it was funny because this album does go places, which we'll talk about. When I first listened to it, I was like, oh, this is maybe a little bit too house for me. But there's the samples really keep it lively for me, keep me invested. Mm-hmm. It does go through a lot of changes. Like, you know, towards the end, it gets pretty hectic for a while, like, which I find pretty engaging. It kind of breaks you out of just the rhythmic straightforwardness of it. So yeah, I thought that was really cool. I just love the idea of putting samples over house music now.
Yeah. Yeah, no, exactly. The samples are extremely good. They're like from some business training video or VHS or something. It's extremely appropriate. Yeah, track 1 was very, Business Alert was very like old school house. This is like what I would associate with like something from the 90s, something like basic synthesizer, very like, I just got a couple synthesizers. I figured out a couple things. We're going to go down the club, throw down some bangers. This is a lot of what like older house music sounds like. Like, you know, I've tried to, like I said, I've tried to get in, and also like techno too. Like there's like, again, I don't know the technical differences between techno and house, but like they're very similar in terms of their genre. So yeah, a bit of that old Detroit techno sound, I think. There is kind of an interesting progression of it, how it starts house and goes more vaporwave a little more experimental. Even this is a short album, how it progresses. Yeah,
it's still pretty dense in terms of ideas, which is interesting. Mm-hmm. There's lots of good business references. You know, the second track is called Salesforce, which is in 2018 was probably not as well known. I think they're recently well known because they kind of had like an implosion and a bunch of layoffs. I think a couple months ago. But they're like we use it at our office. Even they're like a notoriously kind of shitty tracking piece of software.
I've actually been aware of it because I know it was one of those big companies that threatened to move out of Georgia because of some like, there was something like they were passing some sort of, you know, regressive legislation. They're like, we'll pull out of the state if you do that. And I can't remember if they did or not, but like that was how I first heard of Salesforce. It's like they were threatening to leave certain states because of the, anti-LGBT legislation they were passing, I think, or something like that.
Oh, interesting. Okay, so it wasn't like we're getting out of the state because you're going to make us pay taxes. It was
no, it was definitely that. I mean, maybe they were just doing that as cover to get out of there because of that. But like, yeah, I don't know.
Cool.
Yeah,
interesting. But immediately, even starting in Salesforce to me, but really once you hit like track 3, Fire Reward, which is also the basis of the EP. It really like, I really feel like the mood changes to more like late night. Like it's much more synth driven, like in terms of like the quality of the patches and the melody rather than having like great drum patches.
Yeah.
And less percussive to me at times. Like there are parts of it where the drums really come in, but I think a lot of the keys are really the star of some of the later tracks.
Yeah.
And I think that also just goes back to like Groceries also always has like really interesting synth melodies and stuff. So I think, you know, that skill definitely carries over to an entirely different genre. Just really great job in terms of production, I guess would be the word I'm looking for.
Yeah. I mean, we should mention this is not like a solo album entirely.
That's right.
Yeah, there are some there's a guitar
on 2 tracks.
Salesforce.
Yep.
And track 5. And then there's some vocals and so yeah, there's a lot of experimentation, I think. I mean, like I really do like the pads, just overall, like wandering in here and wandering out. It's very fun. I also just like in track 2 the Moodem's vocal sample. Yes, talking about business technology. You love your good Moodem.
A Moodem. That's right. Yeah. It's just really, really enjoyable. Just the fusion. Because it's interesting because it's not quite, it's just this weird line between like signal wave like sampling in the traditional sense of like, here's just a little vocal sample that's in my techno EDM song, and like full blown like signal wave / ponderphonics of I'm reproducing this broadcast. It really hits like a nice middle point, especially when we get into probably my favorite track on the album, which is track 4, Fleet Report, which I'm going to play a little sample from. So I just really loved the synths on this track.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Really hit, just very good. I don't know, like just that the timbre that they went with just like really worked for me.
With that kind of like wah-wah beat, like it felt like a very 70s, 80s, like sci-fi, futurist, like corporate, like technology and science will make us more efficient. And it was very optimistic, almost like kind of like corporate utopianism in terms of like how like upbeat it is. They're very good beeps and boops is what I want to say.
Yeah, I think we both use the phrase good beeps and boops in our respective independent notes about this. It's a technical term, folks. It's, you know, the power of a unified language in describing media. Beeps and boops, and these beeps and boops are very good. Yeah, the back half of this album, once I sort of got into the groove of what it was doing and got over any personal, I'm not super into house biases, like the back half of this album really, really won me over. I really ended up loving it, especially just to round it out. Track 5, which you mentioned, You're Good to Go, which is the other one that has like much more noticeable live guitar on it. Like there's also guitar in Salesforce, but I think in track 5, it feels much more prevalent. Yeah. Like when I think back to it, but I loved it. It was like upbeat. I want to some of these like spacier songs, which you were just talking about, especially this one though, where it is like upbeat keys and guitars and a very different style, it feels to me. It does almost also feel like kind of getting into that ironic corporate house, like this would be playing on like a Cool Kids corporate tape or something. Like it also a little bit toes that meta line for me, because there's, you know, we've talked a lot about like office wave and corporate wave, which is trying to do in sort of the more chill vaporwave space, recreate some sort of hyperreal representation of that type of music. And this feels like it would also be like a very cool like video toaster.
Oh, yeah.
You know, like Will Wheaton's telling me about how I can do wipes now with my home computer.
Oh, God. Yeah. If you don't know what a video toaster is, by the way, just go to YouTube and type in video
I will
toaster.
Put the demo video in the show links because it is essential, like 90s. I shouldn't say essential. That gives it more weight than it deserves, but it is very, very good, like 90s advertising. It's so many people that are so young and should be or are forgotten by now talking about Video Toaster, which was like a revolutionary, affordable way to do video editing, like digital video editing before.
For the Amiga.
Yeah,
basically.
Like long before, you know, any of the nonlinear editing tools we have are just available now. Like you can just go download Resolve for free and shit. And
I also do like the piano that sort of kicks in towards the after the first minute, around the first minute of the last track. Like it's just a really fun and surprisingly complex song for like a house album or like a lo-fi house. Another thing is also I do like there's this bed of lo-fi hiss on the track that you don't really hear, but like it's there. Like I mean, you hear it in the quiet bits, like you know, like in the last couple of tracks, it ends with like this lo-fi hiss. Yeah. So I like that.
You can just kind of tell stuff is not as crisp as it should be. Like you're sort of aware of it.
Yeah.
So that's the full length album. Cooperative Taxi Station. Very quickly do the Fire Reward EP, which is 2 remixes of Fire Reward, which I thought were fine. Like they're pretty good, but
yeah, that's track 3 on Cooperative Taxi.
Yeah. Track 3. This is 2 remixes by Gatter and Mac Bandit, 1 remix each. I would say the other thing, and this is kind of a thing I've always thought about EDM or electronic music, is that sometimes remixes are so far from the original that I wouldn't always pick out like what they're remixing.
Oh, sure. 100%.
I think that's kind of maybe the bit sometimes, but that was the other thing I noticed. I was like, for me, it's a little like, I liked Fire Reward and I would like to see what other people do with it, but it's very different from even like really a reimaginative cover. Like it's kind of like another layer of mutation beyond that, which is both interesting, but also something I'm unfamiliar with. Mm-hmm. But the third original track, I liked a lot, actually.
Oh, it's very happy.
Yeah,
it's a
Perfection.
Very cheerful. Yeah, no, it seems a bit silly, but it's so cheerful. Like I just like it. Like it's a very charming track. Yeah.
Again, for me, toying with that like cool kids corporate music type, like get the 90s youth involved. And then the SoundCloud stuff is interesting. It's a lot of tracks that ended up on Cooperative Taxi Station. Mm-hmm. There's 2 remixes of a Goldfeather and a Mac Bandit song by Null Object. I'm not familiar with the originals, but they're nice to listen to for variety. And then probably the most interesting thing, if you're really into this type of music, is there's a rip of a 2-hour radio show on Wax FM, which is an independent internet radio station based out of New York.
Yeah.
And they do like a house show. And the first hour was just random tracks, curated by the DJ who talks every so often. And then the back half, kind of the last 50 minutes or so of this 2 hours, is a like hybrid live set by Null Object, which was kind of cool.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's how to be honest, most of the time when I listen to EDM, it is a mix.
Sure.
Like I will go on YouTube and there's various DJs and like channels that like just put up mixes every week, like a podcast, and I just listen to them. And then like, if there's a really good track on that, I go to the track list and look up that particular artist. And that's how I discover new music or new artists.
Yeah.
I mean, cause like, that's also like EDM is like, you play a set at a club and that's like going to be like for an hour or 2 hours or whatever. And the whole art of like getting from track A to track B and, smoothly transitioning between the two and making it sound really cool is an art. And I am not ashamed to admit I have researched DJ controllers and thought I should get one and experiment. Then I'm like, no, I do not have the time to do that.
Yeah. Put it in line after keyboards and and Ableton and everything.
So many other things. I've learned to restrain myself a little bit,
that's good. Part of growing up.
Oh no. Damn,
got you.
Hate that.
Sucks.
Yeah.
So, overall, I thought all this music was really good and interesting. And I think the most important thing for me is that it made me think about other stuff I'd like to see. Like that's really what I want out of most art, is like inspiration to think about other stuff of like what I would want to, like what else I'd want to see in the world, even if I can't make it myself, So first of all, I'd love to see more Null Object, which I think is on the way. So back in November on the Discord I talked about at the beginning of the episode, he did make a post of like, hey, I just left a Null Object mastering session. So there might be more stuff in the pipeline. That would be exciting. But I know like real life has been super busy because I think, unfortunately, you got to get an office, as these albums show, you got to get a bit of an office job to kind of keep paying rent so that you can have a place to make music. Unfortunately, that's the cruel reality. So I hope that all goes smoothly for them. But other stuff I was thinking about were sort of 2 things. So what other aspects of vaporwave would I like to see brought into this fusion? Like what other ideas can people explore? And as always to listeners, if this is stuff that exists, post it to me. At me on Twitter. Let me know it exists. 1, there's been a lot of recent, both in my algorithm, your algorithm, and people on our Discord posting this type of stuff, and people on completely unrelated Discords posting this type of stuff, are these like mixes of jungle, like N64 era jungle music. That sort of video game crossover has always been huge in vaporwave. So I think it'd be cool to do like jungle albums for games that don't exist.
Ooh.
Like that type of stuff. Because a lot of these mixes are like race. There's a lot of racing games or like Donkey Kong music or Just because that was kind of the style of the time when they started moving to like these 16 and 32-bit sound systems. You know, there was a lot of electronica from that era, culminating probably in like, you know, jet set radio and stuff, which we talked about.
Mm-hmm.
So that sort of like some of that, like that sort of like hyperreal, like pseudo nostalgia for that type of stuff would be interesting.
Mm-hmm. Actually, a new game, a game that came out last year, Neon White, has like a drum and bass soundtrack.
I've heard Caleb talk about that. Yeah, that's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that would be cool. And then the other broader thing is I was thinking about this live set part on this SoundCloud track from the radio show. And I actually wonder, maybe there's legal or just no one's thought to do it, but I would love vaporwave concert videos.
Oh yeah.
Like concert DVD, maybe, you know, George Clan or somebody with like a bigger budget has done this type of stuff. But even just like release live albums of like, hey, Ronnie does all these sets, right? You know, St. Louis, Vaporspace and stuff. Just take the soundboard audio and throw it up for $5. I'd buy it. Like, I know it's not the same as being there. And, you know, maybe there's some philosophical things with, you know, they want to preserve that ephemeral experience for those who are there. And I get that.
Yeah.
But I would really like to see if people are starting to run vaporwave shows again, which I know have been hard to get off the ground post-pandemic.
Oh, for sure.
You know, air quotes post-pandemic or whatever. Because I know both Ronnie and Pacific Plaza Records have talked about the difficulty in getting kind of everything logistically back where it was. And just bands in general, even like not even like niche genres like vaporwave, you know, other even larger artists have talked about how hard touring, like you just lose so much money touring now if you don't do it right.
Oh, sure.
Or, you know, if something slightly bad happens.
Yeah.
You're just in the tank.
Adam Neely and Pomplamoose have both talked about that. And I'm sure there have been other breakdowns. It's just, it's such a risky thing to go on tour, you know. Yep.
But, you know, just plugged a recorder into a soundboard. I would be absolutely interested in that.
Yeah, I know for EDM, there's this whole thing on YouTube of like live sets being like professionally recorded. Like if you look at Boiler Room sets, like that's a big club in London, and they have people like Burial, and they do like different Burial on the roof of the Boiler Room. You know, he's just on this building's roof in London somewhere, just like. You know, but yeah, that's a whole thing. Like, a lot of trip hop artists do too, not just like EDM. Like Nightmares on Wax had a really good set. Yeah,
and I know other people. I know there's some of this. Like, I know 100% Electronica has put out like catcore live sets on. As soon as you said YouTube, it did occur to me that I wasn't thinking of that. Like, I was very much thinking of like album DVD releases, like classical media.
Okay, yeah.
But there are like, you know, Vectroid does streaming. Is doing some music stuff for a while. I know that Catcore has, I think George, you know, E-Spirit has, Esprit rather, I should say. Oh yeah, Telepath Live. So there's like this Electronicon, you know, they have some live videos from that. So it does exist in some capacity, but it would be interesting if it, I don't know, it was a little more prevalent, but I get it. I get that there's a lot of logistics to go into that.
I mean, like, even as focused as we are on the vaporwave scene and like related genres, there's still more than the two of us could like know about.
Oh, sure.
There's just so much happening. So like, it just goes to show. Cause I know like 100% Electronica have like live streamed some of the shows, you know, like from the last years.
Yeah.
You know, 100% Electronica. So yeah, I know that those kind of things exist somewhere, but yeah, like the quality and like the level of recording and stuff like that are highly variable, and certainly, right. Kind of like it would be cool to do like a concert film kind of thing of a vaporwave.
Yeah, like vaporwave needs its like Stop Making Sense equivalent, which was the Talking Heads early '80s concert show, which was very revolutionary for the time because it was a combination, like had some narrative elements to it. So then it was also like one of the first ones to use like digital sound recording technology. So for like 81 or 82 or whatever, the sound quality was really, really, really top notch. And it's just a cool album because David Byrne's a weird guy, and that's fun to me.
Yeah. Well, let us know if you know of any of this stuff, especially if you're a member of our Patreon. Post it on the Discord. But if not, just let us know on Twitter or Facebook or, you know, wherever you can reach us, depending on if Twitter still exists.
So thanks so much for listening. I hope that we've inspired you to maybe go out and dig into genres of music that you may not immediately think to listen to, because I know that I'm really glad that I engaged with the house project. I don't normally listen to EDM and stuff. So this has been great. Next episode, we're going to our dark ambient, dark jazz roots, along with a favorite topic of one host, Ross Payton, architectural horror, getting into that. So, which I'm also a fan of. I know you know a lot more about architecture than I do, but I do think architectural horror is kind of one of my favorite, like, niche little subgenres in there. So we're going to pick out some music related to that and talk about that a bit. Mm-hmm. You know, good February topic.
Yeah, it's kind of dreary and dark. Yeah,
sure.
Yeah, February is the brutalism of months, if you think about it. That definitely tracks.
I won't think about it. I'll just agree with you.
Okay.
So if you like what we do and you want to hear more of it, we always point out that we do have a Patreon, Night Clerk Radio at patreon.com. There's bonus episodes. There's NSA and doing some other like writing, kind of preparing for that sort of stuff. There's a Discord community that's really cool. I'm toying with the idea of doing some like one-off solo video content, just rambling about stuff that I'm supposed to be writing about, basically. So definitely check all that out if it interests you. Otherwise, you can find us on currently Twitter, website, Facebook, just at Night Clerk Radio, wherever you want to go. Twitter specifically is at Night Clerk Radio. I am at Burke McBurkinson. Ross is at Ross Payton. And as I always say, wherever you do choose to consume our content is the terrible phrase that I have to say. And it's got a button you can click to let the algorithm know that you're watching it and you like it. Go ahead and click that. We'll talk to you next time, and thanks for listening. Bye.
Bye.